How do you go about talking about a legend like Ken Akamatsu? Do you talk about his family life, his highly successful career as a mangaka, or his career as the first manga author to join the national diet? Well, it's a bit of all three, but mostly the latter two. Born in Nagoya in July of 1968, he had to relocate often as his father was a bureaucrat for the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries. Akamatsu has said that his introduction to the world of anime and manga was Sailor Moon, which the Japanese version of the series is much more adult than the version that was localized for daytime TV in the US. Localizers have been ruining a series for far longer than most people realize, but this discovery must have been one powerful moment for Akamatsu. Sailor Moon began publishing as a manga in 1991, and the anime began in 1992. Because 1 year later, in 1993, Akamatsu would publish his first work, a one-shot, called One Summer's Kids Game. And 1 year after that, in September of 1994, would begin the serialization of his first major work, I Love You, 55 chapters of Hitoshi Kobe, a derpy, unpopular nerd whose only talent is coding. He created his own digital girlfriend to talk to, but a freak lightning strike during a storm caused the latest iteration of his digital girlfriend to emerge from the screen. Now his AI girlfriend is a real girlfriend, and her name is 30, and she fills his life with more chaos than he's used to. An ecchi sci-fi rom-com in the mid-90s. It's nothing special or outstanding, but it is far above average for an author's first long-term serialization. It would publish until 1997, and once again, a year later in 1998, Akamatsu would publish the series that would become his best known. An award-winning series about a pathetic ronin struggling to make the grades to enter Tokyo University. Keitaro Urashima, dubbed by Derek Stephen Prince, clings to the memory of his childhood love, a superstition that a couple who go to Tokyo U together will live happily ever after, Tokyo U being the most prestigious and exclusive university in Japan. It's Japan's Ivy League. But Keitaro has a problem. He's an idiot. And a little bit of a perv. He's chasing this Tokyo U dream for the sole purpose of reuniting with his childhood sweetheart. His grades suck and his parents don't really have faith in them getting better. They just want him to get a job and move out. Meanwhile, his grandmother is announcing to her attendants that she's retiring and going on vacation, but arranging for someone to take over her place as manager of the Hinata apartments. The attendants being Naru Narusegawa, dubbed by Dorothy Elias Fan, Mitsune Kono, dubbed by Barbara Goodson, Makoto Aoyama, dubbed by Mona Marshall, Kaola Sue, dubbed by Wendy Lee, and Keitaro's aunt Haruka Urashima, dubbed by Mari Devan. Just don't call her aunt. She hates that. Shinobu Maihara, dubbed by Bridget Hoffman, wasn't one of the residents at the time. She joins the dorms in episode 2. Meanwhile, Keitaro is deep in delusion before an incident that turns him into a pinball. Also recurring side characters Masayuki Haitani, dubbed by Steve Blum, and Kimiaki Shirai, dubbed by Jean Holiday. Anyway, Keitaro needs to get to his grandma's house where he encounters Shinobu. He runs off embarrassed, but his muscle memory remembers the way to Grandma's house, the Hinata Lodge. This should tell you he hasn't been there in a while. He goes wandering through the building, but it seems empty. Surprised to see an onsen was added in his time away, Keitaro decides now's the perfect time for a bath. Well, guess who joins him in the bath? It's Naru. They don't recognize each other for reasons that make sense, kind of. But when she finds out he's not one of the residents, she freaks out. Akamatsu really leans on the comedic violence and lucky lecher trope in this series. Begin the chase sequence where the craziness expands with Sue and her toy tanks. Why does she have toy tanks? And then finally we get a few answers. The inn has been converted into a women-only apartment, and Keitaro was called by his grandma to be the new manager. Shit's not really going well, so Keitaro leaves and ends up consulting Haruka. This is the part of the story that kind of pisses me off. When Haruka is explaining why Keitaro is at the apartments, she says he's a Tokyo U student, but later on in a scene at her tea house, she talks as if Keitaro was the one who lied about it. He didn't. She did. Typical woman behavior of blame shifting. I don't like it. Naru confronts him on the lie, and as it turns out, Keitaro isn't okay with lying to the residents either. Mitsune and Sue walk in and almost catch the conversation, but Naru covers for Keitaro and the stage is mostly set for this ecchi rom-com with very light sci-fi elements. Shinobu doesn't formally enter the cast until episode 2, and Makoto doesn't make an appearance in full until episode 3. So something to note about the dub. There was an error with the script and Mitsune is called Kitsune, which is actually appropriate for how she messes with Keitaro, and this error doesn't seem to be corrected until episode 11, but not completely. It might have been that somebody just made a mistake in translating her name, or it might have been the script actually calling her a fox woman, which is to imply that Mitsune is sly and deceitful, which would ring true when you watch how she behaves. The series as a whole is almost a surrealist daily life rom-com with questionable ethics. There's just enough weirdness to keep you questioning. Like, where is Sue actually from? Why can Tama fly? And all of the archaeology involved with Seta. One of the things I really don't like about the series is Naru's RDM behavior. Most of the time she gets violent, she has absolutely no reason to be. Comedic violence is one thing when it's appropriately timed for effect, but when it becomes a default character trait, it begins to look more like DV and just doesn't sit right with me. Makoto is also excessively and pointlessly violent. Another problem with the series is that it's a product of its time, quite literally. Made by Studio Zebic and aired from April to September 2000, it has that similar feel to advertising for the manga and merch rather than being a work of fiction as a story. Which is really apparent when you go from the anime to the manga, because there is a more connected overarching story in the manga that isn't really at the forefront of the anime. With 120 chapters published from 1998 to 2001, the manga actually draws the story to a close and answers the major plot points. So about the anime, is it worth watching? Yes, it is. It has some pretty glaring flaws, but it's an important part of Akamatsu's career as a manga author, which at present appears to be suspended indefinitely. And with a 25-episode season, 2 specials, and 3-episode OVAs, there's plenty of story to see outside of the manga, though I still think the manga is better and more worthy of your time. Something to note is that the art direction of the anime shifts pretty drastically from the base Love Hina season and the OVA's sequel Love Hina Again, with the OVA art more directly resembling what would become Akamatsu's style in his next work, which I find super interesting for Studio Zebic as it goes to show the wide range of art styles they are capable of. 2 years after the end of Love Hina, Akamatsu's next series would begin Serialization, the biggest series of his career, a manga with a total of 355 chapters, Magic Teacher Negima. So the weirdness begins in the bath with Asuna Kagurazaka, a polychromatic ginger performing a ritual to try and get Takamichi Takahata as her homeroom teacher. Yes, the eye color thing means she's important to the story. Konoka Konoe is also there and gives the feeling that this is normal. Weird, but normal. Because weird is normal for Akamatsu's work. Just go with it. The main character count for the series is 5, though in a way you could argue it's anywhere between 5 and 34, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, there's a stampede of schoolgirls rushing to school. Mahora Academy, an absolutely massive boarding school for girls. The first interaction between Asuna and Negi sets the standard for their dynamic. Asuna is dubbed by Lucy Christian, and Negi is dubbed by Gray Aries, both doing a great job in their roles. A class of 31 is gossiping about getting a new teacher. That teacher is the 10-year-old Negi Springfield. Some students set up a prank, and while Negi initially uses his magic to evade it, he notices that one of the students doesn't seem to be affected by this. So he re-engages the prank and takes the fall. Suddenly the students all feel bad for the kid when Takahata makes his entrance. Now the students know that Negi is to be their new homeroom teacher and English teacher. Most of the girls seem to immediately take a liking to him, except Asuna. Shit gets wild and Negi's magic sneeze strikes a second time. Class doesn't go smoothly with the war between Asuna and the class president Ayaka Yukihiko. Afterwards, Takahata gives Negi the class roster with comments to help him acclimate to the job. Going over his class roster, he spots Nodoka Miyazaki. She's carrying a stack of books and takes the fall down the stairs. Negi uses magic to save her, but he was seen doing so by Asuna, who's now certain he's got psychic powers. This results in Asuna finding out about his wizard status. Negi attempts to mind wipe her, but the only thing he erases is her panties. Though in the manga, it's all of her clothes. One freak out later, and Negi is effectively forced to explain why he's at the academy. He was assigned there as part of his training to become a master mage. Some talk of how to repair things with Takahata happens, and when they go back to the classroom, his class has thrown him a welcome party. A lot of stuff gets thrown at the viewer all at once, a good portion of it having to do with the girls in his class and who they are, without actually stating most of their names. After the party, Negi has been sent to live in Asuna and Konoka's dorm until a room frees up for him, but Asuna drives him out. The next morning, Asuna is leaving for her paper route and feeling like the heel she usually is when she runs into Negi, who's been collecting clovers for a love potion all night. She tells him thanks but no thanks, instead recruits him to be her wingman as she is thirsty AF for Takahata, if you haven't picked up on it yet. One awkward practice confession later, and she's bullying the child some more before bringing him back to her dorm, as he was originally supposed to be there, and now looks like she's more friendly with her teacher now. And that's generally how the story begins. So there's some things that need to be said about Negima. I'll try to keep it from getting too confusing. There are two versions of the story. The manga Maho Sensei Negima, the best version of the story with 355 chapters across 38 volumes. It's the story Akamatsu wanted to tell. This got the anime, which I just talked about. It's 26 episodes of the adapted manga with some creative liberties, bits you won't find in the manga. And then there's Negima Neo, an alternate version of the story of 35 chapters co-written and illustrated by Takaya Fujima, and its anime adaptation, a 26 episode remake of the original story. Negima as a franchise was incredibly lucrative in the mid to late 2000s. So here's the thing. If you go for the main story anime, you're going to be getting a toned down version of the manga story. Less fan service with some extra bits and changes for TV audiences. If you go for Negima Neo, either the manga or the anime, you're not getting the story at all. Negima Neo tries to be goofy, which comes off as not very funny because it's trying too hard. In episode 1, the girls are gossiping about a vampire attack when one of them brings up the chupacabra. If that's where the gag ended, then it would have been fine. But Asuna gets stuck on the idea that it is a chupacabra, and the gag persists, including a scene where she's making a song about it for some reason. And that's what honestly hurts about the anime, because when the main series was animated by Zebek, the alternate series was animated by Gensis, which dissolved in 2018, so they're not around anymore. But also Shaft worked on Negima Neo, and it shows. It has their style all over it. If you're familiar with Shaft's work, then you'll understand that Negima Neo is superior in every aspect over the main series anime, but the story. Because Akamatsu's story of Negima is really, really good. Shaft's other work includes Magical Girl Madoka, Nesikoi, and most importantly, Bakemonogatari. In fact, the entire Monogatari series is animated by Shaft. Once you've seen any part of the Monogatari series, you know the style. It's unmistakable. And the only reason I think it's not as widely recognized as something as, say, Studio Ghibli is because the series Shaft works on are usually rather niche. The Monogatari franchise is insanely popular in Japan, but it has nowhere near as much popularity in the US as Studio Ghibli has. But the problem remains with Negima Neo that it's just not Akamatsu's story. And since we're seeing reboots of old series, and Akamatsu's Love Hina and Negima both deserve reboots that more closely follow the original story, like with Fruits Basket and Rurouni Kenshin, I really hope that if Negima does get a remake, Shaft are the guys that make it. Though realistically it might end up being JC Staff. since when Xebec went defunct, it was mostly JC staff who absorbed their animators. But now to talk about Akamatsu's most recent work without talking about the end of Negima, because it's a sequel. Opening on his class at Mahora Academy, Negi greets his students. Yep, of course that would happen. But it was all a flashback by Evangeline, one of the most depressing openings to an anime I've ever seen to a story set up by narration. Opening with a slight remix of Happy Material, UQ Holder is the story of Immortals. A group of boys with wooden sticks set up to ambush a woman on the road. Her name is Yukihime, and their surprise attack is cut radically short by her barrier before she counterattacks. She's their teacher, and she apparently never told them she could use magic. It's been 80 years since the events of Negima, and about 10 years since knowledge of magic had become common knowledge, even being integrated into technology so ordinary people could use basic magic. As it turns out, Yukihime is also the custodian of one of the boys that attacked her, Tota Konoe, whose motivation is to ascend the orbital elevator, the Pillar of Heaven. There's some multi-dimensional shenanigans at play here, so for the sake of continuity, consider UQ Holder both a sequel and another dimension of Negima. It makes more sense the more you read it. Tota visits the graves of his parents and grandfather, who is Negi Springfield.
Good guess, but actually no.
Life continues on, and it's the daily defeat for Tota and the lads. Another teacher by the name of Tachibana offers to help the lads learn magic so they can finally beat Yukihime. When Tota still fails to get the gadget to work, Tachibana hands him a bracelet and says he just has to get her to wear it. Bashful boy that he is, when she shows up in naught but a towel, he gives her the bracelet and runs off. The following evening, she's happily wearing it when the lads use their new magic to ambush her and bind her with vines. The lads then get laid out by Tachibana. He's not a teacher. He's a bounty hunter, and he's after Yukihime. The bracelet blocks her magic, so she's screwed. He does a bad guy monologue just long enough for Tota to show up for the rescue. Or not. He gets chopped. Tota's about to get bodied when Yukihime plot powers her way onto the scene to block the strike. She ends up quite brutally minced. Then Tota gets skewered. Tachibana turns to kill the lads next, but neither Tota nor Yukihime are dead yet. She's just an upper torso and head, but still tells him that if he wants to save his friends, he has to drink her blood and become an immortal monster. Of course, the lad does it, and goes on the offensive with his new powers. He still gets thrown around, but his regeneration seems weirdly strong. Then he bodies Tachibana, sending him flying. If you're familiar with Negima, then you already know, and if you're not, then you've probably already guessed it. Yukihime is Evangeline, and the incident turned Tota into a vampire hybrid. Why a hybrid and not just a vampire? Because Tota isn't what we were presented. So begins in earnest Tota's journey with Eva, following the ghosts of the past to find out truths you wouldn't have expected from a series that began in 2013. Something that really stuck with me about this series is that all of the main protagonists are immortal in one way or another. Tota and Eva are vampires. Kuromaru is the result of immortal experiments, with an immortality factor of B rank. He's like Deadpool, but better. He can get hurt but heals at a supernatural rate. Where it would take Deadpool hours to regrow an arm, for Kuromaru it takes seconds. Karen has the divine curse of inviolability. She's, quote, not permitted to die or get hurt, and is a curse because of who she is. There's a reason it's called a divine curse. Kyrie actually has two forms of immortality: the elixir of eternal youth, self-explanatory, and reset and restart. This ability allows her to make a save point, so when she dies, she reverts to that point. This is the one I have problem with, because while you would consider it skill-based immortality, it's also bullshit time travel. Time travel ruins everything. It's not interesting, it's a cop-out for lazy writing. Anyway, Iku is one of the Mechanikas. Jinbei ate a mermaid once and technically isn't completely immortal, just ageless. And Gengoro's immortality allows him to earn 1-ups for every good deed. In a way, it's an interesting idea to give all the important characters a form of immortality to shape their character, but at the same time, had Akamatsu done a bit of research before writing the characters, then he could have come up with better ideas than bonfires and toadstools. The Philosopher's Stone. Gilgamesh Utnap-Ishtim. There's a lot of immortality myths and legends that could have been drawn from, especially since Karen's character already directly implies the Judeo-Christian God exists in this fiction. Akamatsu literally turned Judas Iscariot into an anime girl. I'm not joking about that, that's her story. But one of my favorite aspects of the series is how the immortals fight. A character that knows it can't die operates in a very different way than one that knows it can. This concept really shines through with how Tota fights. He's wild to the point he's almost breakdancing. Akamatsu really polished his style for high-paced action with Negima, though you really don't get to see much of it until halfway through the series when Negi starts blending his magic with martial arts he learns from Ku Fei and Xiaoling Shen. It really shows in the combat sequences, especially in the fight between Tota and Kaito. One thing that might really strike casual anime watchers as weird is the difference between Negima Evangeline and UQ Holder Evangeline. In Negima, she's very serious to the point of seemingly single-minded, but in UQ Holder, she's so far beyond relaxed that she's almost just playful with Tota. You get a better idea of how this happened from the manga, but if you're not inclined to spend time reading, then this could seem like a really shallow character change. Also, a major story flaw with UQ Holder is that there aren't really any stakes to the fights, making them seem kinda pointless. If there were actual consequences, then they would be more meaningful. Still, I like the base idea of a group of immortals trying to deal with the reality of being immortal. I want to say magic aside, but there's going to need to be some level of magic involved in anything immortal. And the start of the series being depressing as Evangeline talking about how immortality isn't a blessing is a great opener to it. And once again, with the anime, I think Akamatsu's work got the short end of the stick. Love Hina has 120 chapters worth of story, with 27 episodes barely covering just enough of it to be a complete story for anime. Negima got it even worse with 355 chapters and ending up with 70 to 80% of the story not even reaching the anime. UQ Holder has 193 chapters in total with only one 12-episode season and 3 episode OVAs. Most of the actual stories of these series the anime watchers will never know, if they're even included at all. With the fight in the slums, there's this whole part of the event where a literal small army of immortal hunters with tanks and aircraft square off with UQ Holder because Jinbei, Gengoro, and Iku show up with Eva. And with reboots becoming more popular, I can see the three getting the reboot treatment. Since the UQ Holder anime was made by JC Staff, who basically absorbed Zebek, then it would make sense if they decided to make it work like it's Black Clover or My Hero Academia, one season at a time until the story is told, however seasons it may take. I think it would do really well that way. Also, something to note about the anime, Akamatsu hid the kanji in the romaji. UQ translates to eternity, perpetuity, permanence. So you can reasonably translate eternity holder to immortals, because that's what the characters are. Immortal. Akamatsu's work was horribly butchered when adapted to anime, but as a manga author and a nerd, he had other priorities. All of that history as a manga author comes into his political activism. In 2011, he warned that the proposed changes to copyright law under the proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership would destroy Japan's derivative doujin scene. He continued to voice his concerns in the following years. In 2013, as a spokesman of the Japan Cartoonist Association, he joined other creators in opposing the Liberal Democratic Party and its partners' proposed amendments to Japan's child pornography laws, a draft version of which included wholly fictional depictions such as lolicon in manga in its definition. Imagine wanting to ban fictional children from cartoons. Akamatsu visited the National Diet and the LDP headquarters to express his concerns, and the final bill passed in 2014 without a ban on explicit anime and manga. He was appointed as the managing director of the JCA in 2018, and in 2019, Akamatsu and the JCA expressed concerns on a government subcommittee's plan to extend copyright law, under which downloading or taking screenshots of anime images and illustrations illegally posted to blogs and Twitter would have been made illegal, as would copying and pasting song lyrics. Bet y'all didn't know that was going on in Japan, now did ya? In 2020, Akamatsu was invited to advise legislatures in the Diet on the future of manga, stating that, compared to other countries, Japan's forte is its freedom of creativity based, and that a situation where Japan's works are regulated by foreign standards should be avoided. Absolute Chad energy. In December 2021, Akamatsu announced a candidacy in the 2022 election for the National Proportion Representation Bloc of the House of Chancellors, the upper house of the Diet, under the LDP banner. He stated that his major goal was to protect creative freedom of expression, and during the election campaign criticized external pressure, both foreign and domestic, to regulate Japan's freedom of expression, especially for manga, anime, and games, elaborating that such regulations need to be approached with rationality. On July 10, 2022, Akamatsu won a seat after campaigning in person in all 47 prefectures, becoming the first manga creator in Parliament. An early initiative of his was a task force on proposed legal framework for preservation of past and present Japanese video games in playable state. This manga hero, this absolute Chad man, put his reputation where his principles are. He ran for office on the platform of protecting creative freedom and preserving media, and he got the seat. Brandon Herrera is pulling an Akamatsu, albeit his thing is guns and not cartoons, but, orange juice, pineapple juice. He sees laws targeting something he holds dear, and instead of just sitting on the sidelines and saying, I just want to grill, he used his wealth and the brand he built up with his manga to get a place where he can at least try to institute some preservation. Ken Akamatsu is an absolute legend. He's one of the greatest manga authors ever, not because of the work he's done as an author, but because he genuinely loves the arts and his country and wants to protect it. If only more Americans were that way about the Constitution. Most have never even read it or know what it actually says, and that's a real tragedy. Be like Ken Akamatsu. Stand up, get in office, fight back. All evil needs to succeed is that good men do nothing, and they are hoping that we do nothing.